livestock specialist with small ruminant. And we have our speaker, Mr. Mark Green, that he will be speaking about how to minimize the cost of feeding during the winter. That is one of the things. So you increase your profits with the prices of your sellings, or you reduce your cost of both things. And winter feeding is one of the main issues. So we are so happy to be here. But do you want to introduce by yourself, Dr. Acharya, and later on, Gabriel Lapo?
Welcome everybody. I am Mohan Acharya. I work as a state extension specialist for sheep and goat production for here in Missouri. With Dr. Salinas and I and Gabriel, Mr. Gabriel Apple, we organize sheep and goat educational programs for the Missouri as well as outside. Thank you.
Sorry, I taking attendance. So my name is Gabriel Apple. I am the small ruminant program educator here with Dr. Salinas and Dr. Acharya. I help take attendance and make sure all the gears stay oiled as best I can. I did have a couple things to go over really quick before we get started. So as many of you guys know, this is a certificate program. Not all of you may necessarily be trying to get the certificate out of it. A lot of people are just here for a few of our talks. So if that is something that you are interested in, I will be sending out emails towards the end of the series, just going over attendance, whether you were there or not, which is why it's so important that we have you change your name, which you can do if you go to your little video block where your name is at the top right, the three dots. You can hit that and rename yourself, which will help us a lot. If you don't do that or you don't want to, you're welcome, or can't figure it out, you're welcome to just go into the chat, put your first and last name in there. That makes it where we can make sure that you are getting your attendance counted, as well as each week we do a raffle, as we did last week. We do a raffle for the previous week based on attendance. So if you don't put your name in there or don't change your name, we have no way of finding your email address, which is how we inevitably reach out to you. So that's something to think about. And then I thank you for the question, Kayla. We do have all of our previous videos. It takes a few days just to make sure they're edited correctly. If we can, we try to, but we try to make sure they're edited and set up within a couple of days. Dr. Salinas does that.
Yeah, they are already in the YouTube channel.
Okay, so everything is uploaded at this point. So if you missed a video, you're welcome to, that link is posted now in the chat from Dr. Acharya. You can follow that link and watch the previous videos. There should be a few questions in the description, as well as poll questions, which we'll do like today, that you can answer those questions, send us the answers, and we'll give you credit for that video, so you don't have to miss out if the certificate is something that you're interested in. So is that everything? Did I miss anything, Dr. Salinas?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay, well, Mr. Green, you're so welcome. You want just to start again? Probably we have some new people here. You want to share who you are, where are you located, what you do, and later on to share your experience, start how to get better numbers economically.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Mark Green. I run cattle down by north of Springfield, Fairgrove, Missouri. I worked for USDA NRCS for 40 years doing grazing management work and working all over Southwest Missouri, but helping folks with the grazing system and the grazing management. I retired about 4 years ago now and did start a consulting firm on grazing management, custom pasture planning, and consulting, trying to help folks with their grazing systems or troubleshooting electric fence, livestock water, all of that. I even hold electric fence field days and livestock water field days down here. So anyway, I guess we'll get started. See if I can get this going. Okay. So I decided to approach this a little different. I hope you're okay with it, because there is no magic bullet to just all of a sudden today minimize winter feed costs. To me, it's a lot bigger picture. And bottom line is less hay and more grazing, I think. But in the Midwest, fescue's our main fat grass, our main forage. This says Missouri, but if you're from Arkansas, you know what fescue is.
Hate to interrupt you. Sorry, Mr. Green.
Yes.
I'm not seeing your screen. I'm just seeing you.
Okay. Thank you. I must have hit something wrong. Let me see. Oh.
Okay, I'm seeing the browser.
Is it working now?
Yes. Yes. Is the first slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's working.
Yeah.
We
Right.
good?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm glad you hollered. I hit the first button, forgot to hit the second button. So I'm not the best at some of this stuff, but we'll make it. So fescue's being our main forage in the Midwest. And anybody's familiar with fescue realizes there's two, I guess you could say, two main gaps on our forage supply. Of course, the winter and the summer. It's a cool season grass, makes about 60% of its growth in the spring, maybe 10% in the summer, and 30 to 40% in the fall, usually. So we need to always be looking at ways we can help with these gap areas. Of course, winter being a big one, probably the biggest cost part of it. Normally, the way most folks address this is feeding hay and supplements, or grazing stockpile, crop residue, other perennials, or maybe summer or winter annuals. I want to hit on several ideas here to try to help us extend this forage for supply. But I want to go ahead and start out with that first question, just right off the bat. If you want to go ahead and post it.
Apologies. I'm having trouble still seeing your screen. If everybody else can, it's not a problem. I just want to make sure if there's anyone that can't see.
Are we
okay? Well, if everyone, I'm not worried about it. If you can't see, let us know. But otherwise, it should be fine.
Okay, here is the question. What is the lowest cost way to feed a cow, goat, sheep, or horse? Okay, the people is answering. 24 of 33, 26. 27. Okay. Here are the results. Okay. 96% of the people answered the pasture. And do you agree, Mr. Green?
Well, yeah, I got a good group here. Yeah. Yeah, it sure is. I'm going to go ahead and go on with it because do I get that question out of the way?
Yes.
Okay.
You're good.
Got it. All right. If we look at pasture and compare it to basically any other feed, we're going to feed a grazing animal. This says ruminants, but you could throw a horse in there too. And if we set pasture at just an index of 100, and start comparing it to any other feed. As you can see, hay is well over double the cost, silage almost triple. You get in the grains, triple the cost. And I think we all, if we don't stop and realize it, we know why. And we got the labor, the machinery, the fuel costs, all in between that forage and that animal. Just a pretty easy rule of thumb, grazing management strategy 101, a cow, sheep, goat, horse, they can harvest that forage cheaper than any of us can. Anytime we put anything, Jim Garrish had a quote basically saying, anytime we put anything between the forage and the animal's mouth, it's going to cost more money. So, and it's true. So we need to look at ways, even for this winter feeding, how we can help that out and make the animal do the work for us. We need to look at I'm going to look at the big picture though on your place, and the best way, first thing to look at is that proper stocking rate. Because if we're overstocked, if we got too many animals, it doesn't matter how fancy a grazing system we've got, we're going to have to start adding more feed and buying it, and costs are going to go up because each place is only going to produce so much forage. So we need to look at that. And there's a couple of terms, stocking rate is actually the number of animals you're going to have on your place. Carrying capacity is the number of animals or that stocking rate that your place can handle. The soils can produce, how much forage is produced. And a goal should be that stocking rate that you set, you never try to have it over that carrying capacity, maybe a little under. And we're going to talk about this some, because if you've never calculated your carrying capacity, and these rules of thumb will get you in a wreck. I always get asked, well, how many cows can we run? 3 to 5 acres to the head or whatever. It all depends. But if we look at this and the forage production, how much forage production we've got for a year, how much we're going to utilize. So basically on top of this equation, how much forage is available. Bottom of it is how much that animal needs, the daily intake times your length of your grazing season. I put together an example here. So if we had 8,000 pounds of production per acre on the farm on a 40-acre place, that means we've got 320,000 pounds total production for the year. If we're only going to utilize about half of it in a grazing system, and that means available for those animals, we got 160,000 pounds. I just took 160-pound goat. That may be big, but I just using it for an example. 3% daily intake, 3% of their body weight. So that animal, that one goat would need 4.8 pounds per day. Now, you take that out over 365 days if you were trying to calculate how many animals your place could handle for a year, use 365. That might mean you're cutting the hay off your place in a little bit. That's 1,752 pounds that they need, and so on, 300 days grazing, 1,440 pounds. Calculating that out down below, that comes out about 91 sheep for 365 days, 104 for 320 days, 111 for 300 days. Realizing we're calculating grazing here. We're not counting bringing any hay in, anything like that. But that's where you want to start. If you're overstocked, you're overstocked. So knowing how many animals you can handle, and then going from there is the first step. Are those numbers going to work all season? If you remember that growth curve we already looked at, what happens in the middle of the summer? You always got that shortage. So adjusting. Some of the old timers used to say never run enough, always set your stocking rates to get through a drought. Well, that might be a good idea. The other side of that is how much are we going to utilize? Efficient utilization of that forage. Are we growing forage on the farm that the animal isn't using? So I'm leading into question number 2, if you want to throw that up there.
Okay, here is question 2. How can we get the best efficiency and utilization in grazing pasture? Well, the people is very fast. Yeah, really. Yeah. You can see there.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a good group here.
Yeah.
You betcha. Yeah, exactly right. If we can start splitting an area up into smaller pastures and rotate them around, we can improve that utilization. If you look at that graph on the right, that white graph, that's looking at length of grazing period compared to utilization. Way I like to talk about utilization is how much of the available forage are we getting in their belly and not wasting. And I'm talking about available forage. We don't want to use it all. And if we look out there past 30 days grazing, that utilization rate's dropping down to that 35%. Relate that over here to the left one, what we call continuous grazing. In other words, they're open to the whole place. You never rotate them. You're only getting about 30% utilization. There's several reasons for that. One is they may not be grazing some of those areas. They're too far from water, not grazing them very good. They go back to the areas they already grazed before they're ready and bite them off instead of grazing those other plants that are getting rank. And then stomping on it, manure piles, all of the above. So if we can get into these smaller pastures and rotate them faster and get those rest periods in, we can improve that utilization, get better use out of our forage that we're growing. Because another way to look at it, if you were at continuous grazing and you got up there to 12 paddock system, you almost doubled the amount of forage you're getting available to those animals. A friend of mine says like buying another farm. So another thing to look at is with those fast rotations, we have that spring growth, the way too much growth all the time, and then not enough in the summer. But what we found, if you look at the dotted line, so that's a 24 paddock rotation, a fast rotation, we're actually pushing some of that growth on into the summer to help us some more there. And same thing on into the fall, because we're kind of topping it off and stockpiling a little bit rather than with a slow rotation or no rotation. That big flush of growth we get in the spring gets way ahead of us. So it's another way to look at how that grazing efficiency can help us. I threw this in here actually on a side note because a question came up when I was talking about stockpile and the endophyte and ergovaline concentrations. And this shows what I was talked about if anybody was on that webinar, but the lower part of that plant is higher in the endophyte, that stem, that 2 inches or below, whereas the 4 inches, 6 inches on up the leaf isn't near as high in the endophyte. So goes right along with our grazing management to not be grazing it in the ground Plus, as many of you know, oh, sorry, I just forgot the term, the bugs.
The parasites.
Parasites, thank you.
Yeah.
The parasites are going to help with them too. So it's a win-win deal if we can be rotating and keep our grazing heights up higher. But I just found that on a quick side note to back up what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Another thing to look at on extending the grazing system is trying to get other forages in there, use of legumes. Again, back to our cool season grasses, fescue, brome, orchard grass, all of them have that summer slump that we got to deal with. And then of course no winter forage to speak of. But these are several legumes that we look at trying to add to our pastures. Probably most common we use is red clover, white clover, and annual Lespedeza. I like Lespedeza because it helps fill in the summer gap somewhat because it's a summer annual and can work well. So they can be a real plus by getting these grasses, I'm sorry, these legumes in there. Actually, it's interesting, alfalfa, even though it's supposedly a cool season, it is more of an all-season plant. If somebody, very good grazing system, we could probably graze it in with the grass. And it, as you can see there, it still grows pretty good in the summertime. But that also helps the diversity and the quality of your pasture by getting these other plants in there. High quality forage, improve that diversity, improve animal performance, can help manage the fescue endophyte problem, and as I mentioned, that summer production. The other thing to look at, and bear with me if the main reason you were here is on the winter, because a lot of this is going to help us with our winter forage, is if we can think about adding some warm season grasses for our summer forage.
Mr. Green, we have a quick question.
Sure.
He asked, is it possible or isn't it possible to use grazing red clover during breeding can cause infertility?
That's a very good point. And in fact, I'm glad to ask that because I was going to mention with some of the small ruminants and even with horses, there's some of these you would want to do your homework on before you just decided to add them. With most cattle, we don't have an issue other than you get too much of it, you can have a bloat issue. So ideally you got about 30% mixed in with the grass. Some of those issues with some of the small ruminants or horses, I would check into. I think it could be an issue with Alsite clover with horses, for example. And I'd always do my homework before I just went out and wanted to add some of these to my pasture situation, depending on what animals I'm running. So that's a really good point that I didn't mean to mention. Hope that helped. But yeah, on the warm season grasses, they are what they are. Their name says, they make 100% of their growth in the summertime, whereas our cool seasons, like we've already talked about, spring and fall. I'll come to this a little more, but you kind of take note on these growth curves here, which ones actually fill that summer gap better than some of the others. I'm more of a fan of big blue and Indian grass for that reason, because they fill that summer gap better than switchgrass and eastern grammagrass. These are the natives, the tall grasses. Of course, 3 of these pictures are terrible pictures to talk about for grazing because the Indian, big blue, and switch are way too big to be grazing. They wouldn't even eat that very good. You'd need to be looking at them more like they got that picture for the eastern grammagrass. I need to improve my pictures there. These are all natives. So as I'd already mentioned, whoops, sorry about that. That big blue and Indian, if I'm looking at species perennials for to fill that summer gap, I'm going to consider those. Switchgrass, I'm not a fan of because it comes on too early. The introduced warm season perennials, Caucasian blue stem and Bermuda grass, can be good. I've done a lot of work with Caucasian blue stem in the past, a little bit different management than the natives. Bermuda grass can be a very good grass. If you're southern Missouri or south, I always say if you're going to plant it, you better want it because you're never going to get rid of it. Because if you're familiar with Bermuda, it's there, but it can be a mighty good forage to fill that summer gap. And they both, their growth does pretty good job of filling that gap that we have in the summertime. So, I'm sorry. And then the annuals is another way to look at it. I'm a perennial guy. I don't like to have to plant things every year, but sorghum sudan, corn, millet, crabgrass can make a very good forage. Noble Foundation years ago, R.L. Dalrymple started working on improved varieties of crabgrass for pasture, and some of these improved varieties are amazing. Well worth considering, very high quality. Sudan, pearl millet, you can have some prussic acid or nitrate poisoning issues if you're not careful. You got to learn how to manage them. You can manage them. They make very good summer pasture and a lot of it. Make good forage production these warm seasons, summer production. But a couple of things. The next three is why I wanted to talk about them. We can help manage that fescue endophyte problem by getting off of that fescue in the summertime when that endophyte's hotter. We can help manage that spring growth of the cool seasons by grazing it and then going straight to our cool seasons, warm seasons. But also we can allow the rest of those cool season pastures by grazing our warm seasons in the summertime and save those cool season pastures to help us more in the fall and the winter pasture and save up that for that stockpiling and winter pasture. They're very adaptable. They actually will use less, they'll produce about twice as much dry matter per pound of water as the cool season grasses. And the animal performance on them, they're well worth considering. Biggest problem is getting them established is a little tricky, but there's a lot of work been done. And if you had any interest in them, there's a lot of help out there to talk with about it. I wouldn't just go down to the seed store and think I'm going to buy it and plant it, though you want to do homework on it. This is some quick quality. I'm not going to go clear through this, but the quality of it can be very high. This over on the right, Ian Kurtz, friend of mine, this summer he did this study. He got over 2 pounds a day gain on steers going through this summer just on big blue stem. As you can see, that protein's pretty good. So the quality is very good for the animals. Get the question of how much is needed. Usually, ideally, even if a person didn't get there initially, 20 to 40% of your total pasture would be ideal. But even if you just got 10%, it could help you with that summer slump. The other thing, I did talk quite a bit about stockpile a couple of weeks ago, but it is definitely an way to help us get through that, economical way to help us get through the winter. And so let's go to question 3. And if you did listen 2 weeks ago, you ought to get this, no problem.
Okay, here's the question. What grass is best for winter stockpile? Pasture.
While we give them a minute to answer that question, I think this is probably your last question, Mr. Green.
I've got one short one right at the end.
Okay, well then I'll go ahead and do this now. We'll go ahead and do the raffle for the book for our attendance last week. I'll be honest, I was working on the list and I forgot to print it out so I could do a physical raffle. So I'm going to do a random number generator, and then give that, and each person has a number in my attendance sheet from last week. So it looks like number 9, which is going to be Tanya Fagan. I hope I said that right. Tanya. Okay, good deal. So I will get your email from Dr. Salinas later today or tomorrow, and I'll send you an email. I will go ahead and show everyone the books that we're giving away. And in the email, Tanya, it'll have the pictures of the books so that you can look them up if you'd like. So we have Pipestone's Veterinary Guide to Sheep and Goats, this Story's Guide to Raising Meat Goats, Raising Animals for Fiber, and a Butchering Poultry, Rabbit, Lamb, Goat, and Pork. So those are the books that we're giving away this series. And again, for anyone that has come in a little bit late, please feel free to change your name, or if you haven't already, put it in the chat box, put your name in the chat box so we can add your attendance for this session. And we'll give away a book next week.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. The answers to the questions, you can see Mr. Green over there, 77% say that it's fescue, 16% orchard grass, and some others brown grass and crop grass. So what is your comment, Mr. Green?
Yeah, well, you can actually stockpile probably about any grass for winter pasture, even the warm seasons. But quality wise, what we've found, fescue, because it's got a waxy coating on it, on that leaf that protects it, it will hold up the best farther into the winter than any other grass. So fescue is what we work with the most because of that. We've found orchard grass and brome grass melt away too fast as the winter gets colder and colder. And the warm seasons, like crabgrass, and well, crabgrass will melt away pretty fast too. But even the natives, some guys will graze the natives into the winter or through some in the winter. They aren't going to have much quality to them. You'd have to supplement. Whereas fescue, that it's going to hold its quality even when it's brown, as long as we don't stomp it and we strip graze it, and it'll hold its quality clear into March. So yeah, fescue works real well. Just a quick recap. I went in depth in this last time, but I wanted, in case you didn't hear it, for stockpiling recipe, bottom line is you're going to take off the spring growth, use it. We're not stockpiling the spring growth. You're going to hay it off, graze it off, whatever. Your goal is to have about 3 to 6 inches of leaf in mid to late August on that stockpile field that you're going to save for winter pasture. Maybe apply 40 to 60 pounds of nitrogen in August, late August. I don't go much more than 40 or 50 pounds. I've heard guys going as high as 80. I'm not going to do that. And basically you're growing that fall growth. Don't use it till you need it. 60 to 90 days, late November, early December, or if you don't even need it till January, don't use it. Use your other pastures. But the key is going to be that strip grazing. And I'm going to show you some information even farther here in a bit. But strip it out, 1 to 3 day strips. Don't, otherwise they're going to stomp it and waste a whole lot of it. It'd be like putting your whole hay crop out there at the beginning of the winter and expect them to last them all winter. So the key is that strip. So yeah, fescue holds up the best for us for stockpiling.
Yep. There is a question in the chat that if the switchgrass may increase any photosensitivity in sheep. What do you think? I think it's more like probably when in the drought period of time when the plant is stressed, and if you're grazing only that, but probably is not a common thing. What do you think, Mr. Green?
I'm sorry, I didn't really catch that.
Yeah, yes. A person is asking if switchgrass can cause photosensitivity for sheep and goats when grazing on hay.
When grazing on the stockpile?
On the switchgrass, if the switchgrass would cause photosensitivity.
Yeah. There's another reason I'm not crazy about switchgrass, because there can be some issues. I've not heard of some severe issues with it on that that big word. I'm doing good with big words today. But it is there with the switchgrass that you got to watch. And I can't honestly tell you how much with sheep and goats, but it's something to be aware of. Again, if I don't have any and I'm getting ready to plant some, to me that's another reason. I'm just not a fan of switchgrass. If I was only going to hay it, it can make a good hay crop, but I'm not going to plant one season just to hay them. I'm going to plant them to graze them.
Yeah, the literature says that when you overgraze the switchgrass, or when it's a drought, when it's stressed, the grass can produce some photosensitivity in the animals, so they will be having some skin issues, something like that. Yeah, but probably you can, as always, to have a mixed pasture, and you will not having trouble at all. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to look at a little bit of economics on this stockpile that I didn't go into last time. If we take stockpile versus our hay, and back to that goat that I said needed 4.8 pounds of dry matter a day, and I'm kind of trying to convert all this to dry matter. And if we're saying we've got some good grass hay, about $70 a ton. This year that's probably all right. Last year it was probably twice that, but and I forgot to check on nitrogen costs, but I'll stick with this 58 cents a pound on nitrogen. It may be off because I wanted to update that and forgot. But if we put on 40 pounds per acre that I talked about a minute ago, that's $23.20 an acre for our stockpile. That 40 pounds should give us normal years, should give us around 8 inches, maybe 10 inches of growth. And that growth, that good thick fall growth, probably about 300 pounds per inch dry matter. So should give us about 2,400 pounds per acre of stockpile. So that's what I'm basing all this on. And if we look from the hay side, so we said $70 a ton. So that's 3.5 cents a pound divided by 2,000 pounds. So 3.5 cents a pound, and that goat needed 4.8 pounds. That's about 17 cents a day for that goat. Now we didn't figure any waste. If we're going to, and I'm going to touch on this waste here in a little bit later too, but if we factor in about 20% waste, and we always get some waste somewhere in that feeding of hay, that's about 20 cents a day on that goat per head. So now if we look at stockpile, and I took it two ways, if we didn't, this says no rotation. If we had, let's say we had 10 acres of stockpile, we just turned them out there. At 2,400 pounds, I mentioned earlier, and we're only going to get about 35% utilization if you think back to what I talked about earlier. So we're actually only going to have about 840 pounds available. We take our nitrogen cost, divide it by that 840 pounds, that's about 2.8 cents a pound And times that 4.8 pounds that goat needed, we're at about 13 cents per goat per day on that stockpile. But now I want to look at strip grazing. We do the same thing, but now if we can get that utilization up there about 70%, and we're stripping about every 2 to 3 days, we can do that. We got about 1,680 pounds of available forage. Divide that out. Now we're down to about 8 cents a goat per day with our nitrogen cost for that stockpile. So if we compare all those together, the hay, let's just say 80 days. If we're trying to get through 80 days, hay is going to cost per goat about $13 to $16 a goat. That stockpile on the strip grazing, about $6, just under $6.50 for that. So per day, that's about 12 cents of savings on the goat per goat. And for the year, about just under $10. I just threw in, say you had 100 head, that's $700 to $960 dollars years of savings, simply by strip grazing them. Now somebody will always say, well, what do I gotta buy fencing and stuff, and you're right. But remember that I'm going to say the $960 because that's counting the waste on that hay. So let's say you don't have any electric fence. You're starting from scratch. You're gonna need 2 reels. You can probably make two wires work for those animals. Some tread-in posts for about a 1/4 mile. If you don't have electric fence already, you're gonna have to get a portable charger. Calculate all that out. It's going to last you at least 5 years. It'll last you way more than that, but it's about $122 per year cost. If you had to buy a charger to go with it. So you go back to that savings on the stockpile, it's still going to pay to look at stockpile versus AN. We've always said in the grazing schools, even if you don't do anything else, if you can go home and look into starting to try to stockpile, you're going to probably save more money than anything else. Had this slide put together for cattle, but I revamped it. I took that 11 cents savings, that 100 goat head, about 15 minutes a day to move those animals. So you're getting paid about $44 an hour to move that fence. That's not too shabby. Now my wife won't pay me that, but and one other comment I'll make, if you ever come to fence school, I always make it, but this is the only good use I've found for a golf bag, but it works real good. Sorry if you're a golfer, but it works. So yeah, it can pay. And back to the quality, I went into more in depth last time, but comparing that hay to your stockpile, the hay down below, average hay runs in that less than 20% crude protein. The stockpile will start up about 20% there in October, and even in March it'll still be at probably 10, 12% protein. And the TDN stays good, does real well too. So it'll actually, this was some samples and fecal samples and stuff, work done back in 97 through 2003 by Mark Kennedy. Some actual numbers showing the quality of stockpile. Another thing on bale grazing, another way to extend that is, and the biggest thing on the bale grazing, where we're putting it out, trying to put our hay out and only enough hay to last them a few days, is probably the biggest thing. 2 things on bale grazing is we're reducing our waste, and less labor because we're placing that hay out there and stripping them and grazing those areas and moving them pretty fast through the hay too. The trick to this that can be a little trickier with your smaller animals is I don't want to give them any more hay than last them 2 or 3 days. So I might not be able to, I might have to work with that a little compared to cattle on my big brown bales to work it out right. But I do want to touch on that a little bit because they're not only the waste of the hay for your forage for your animals, but there's a lot of nutrients in that hay too, about 25 pounds of nitrogen and 7.5 pounds of phosphorus, 20 pounds of potash. And bottom line, I could spend a whole talk just on how to feed hay to reduce waste or comparing them and how much you're losing. Plus, are you spreading that manure out over those fields and that hay out over the fields? I just want you to stop and think about how are you feeding your hay and look at options to reduce that waste. They've even done studies on hay rings and hay feeders showing which one to reduce waste the most. It's well worth doing your homework on unrolling them versus putting them in a ring. I feel unrolling them is a good thing, but only unrolling enough to last them a few days. If you unroll a full bale for 10 sheep, you're going to waste a lot of it because it's going to weather and they're going to lay on it and everything else. So
Let's go to the questions that are in the chat. Questions and comments. I think you cannot open the microphone.
Oh,
pardon me?
can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We just had a couple comments.
Yep.
Sorry, my Zoom is giving me a little bit of issues. Adelina pointed out that the percentage of waste is how she eliminated some of her hay suppliers, having only a few goats and a few cows. If they wouldn't eat, it was all waste. That's what she said.
Yeah.
And then Suzanne said a trick that she used with her horses and sheep was to take 2 or 3 pig panels and encircle the hay feeder. What got dropped between the feeder and the pig panel wouldn't get dirty or stomped on, and they'd pick through and eat more of that. And then I'm not 100% sure. I might have missed something, but Mr. or K Light, sorry, said, does the fescue have the same issues of endophytes?
The fescue?
Mm-hmm. The fescue
Yes.
hay.
Yeah, fescue hay does, but it will reduce some in storage. Now, it goes back to when was it put up? Any hay is always going to be higher quality when it was harvested, when that seed head first just barely comes out. Problem is we harvest most of our fescue when the seed head is mature, and that seed head has a heavy dose of the endophyte in it. So if your hay is harvested in that situation when the endophyte is, the seed head were mature, you not only have a heavy dose of endophyte in it, but lower quality because that plant was mature compared to what they call the boot stage is always going to be higher quality. So yes, fescue hay can have the endophyte in it. As it's stored, that will reduce. Just for an example, 2-year-old seed, and not really hay, but 2-year-old fescue seed will be a lot lower in the endophyte, almost very little endophyte left compared to 1-year-old seed. So that can be a situation there. If it's a second cutting of fescue where it didn't have very many seed heads in it, then it's probably a pretty good situation on your end of fight. I
Awesome.
might have got too wordy there, but
Sounds good to me. Thank you.
mhm. And I some really good comments on how to feed hay to sheep and goats. In fact, I've got 6 goats, so I'm kind of in boat with that other person, and I'm not going to waste a round bale. I feed those to my cattle, and I went ahead and got some square bales to feed to them and rigged up some feeders because, yeah, one round bale lasts them all winter plus, and they'll waste a lot of it. So, yeah, it well worth looking into how you're going to do it and trying to look at those. Well, I tell everybody I spent 40 years steal ideas on feeders, even on reducing that waste. I think we waste and how you're storing your hay. Big round bales stored outside. Like I said, I could spend a whole talk just on hay waste because those that are stored outside, sitting on the ground, that first 6 inches of diameter or circumference of that hay bale is, I forget the numbers, but it's close to 50% of the volume of that bale. So how we're storing our hay and how we're feeding it is a huge money savings if we can work on that. So the other thing to look at is winter annuals. I want to spend a little time on this. I know I'm running out of time, but so I'll go through it fairly quick. But the brassicas, turnips, rape, kale, Swedes, some other things can make some very good quality early winter forage. They're once it gets cold and real cold, and this says it won't hold up much past first of this January, and it's true. The hard freezes, they go away pretty fast. But that early winter, they can make some real high quality feed for animals. There's some situations you got to watch on some of these too with different animals, but they can help fill the gap pretty good for part of the winter. Cereal wheat and rye can do a nice job of some grazing clear through the winter at times. Rye is actually more winter hardy. Cereal rye is more winter hardy than wheat, and they're very high quality. The thing you got to watch about rye is come early spring, it's going to go mature very fast. But if you're grazing it out, you don't have that problem. But they can make a high quality feed to graze in the wintertime. Annual ryegrass is very high quality, can make some really good grazing. Produces more spring growth than fall growth. It probably doesn't totally fill that winter gap as good as maybe the annuals, but it can be a very good producer. The caution with the annual ryegrass is even though it says it's an annual, it produces a seed crop pretty heavily. And if you're just using it to maybe convert to something else, I would never use it because there's going to be a lot of seed there that it'll just keep coming back on you. If you're going to keep using it, that can be a positive, but that you want to watch that. Grazing dormant hay fields. Bottom line, I'm not even sure why I put this in here other than that could be your stockpile. Say you hayed off a field, if you had hay field in the spring, then that could be saving it for stockpile in the wintertime. I got one last question there if you want to throw it up there, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, sure, I will go. Okay, it's a brief fast question. Is it possible to graze livestock 365 days a year? Yes or no? Like in the school, now you had to explain your answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I will go now. Okay. 80% say yes, 20% of the people say no.
Okay, yeah, and hey, it's almost yes and no because it's not going to work for everybody, not going to be for everybody, and depending on the part of the country you're in, you get farther north, probably not. Where we're at in southern Missouri, there's guys that are doing it. We can do it with the stockpile and using stockpile, using warm season grasses for the summertime to save our fall grass for stockpile, maybe some winter annuals, maybe even crop. I didn't talk about it, but if you're next to a cropping area, maybe some neighbors let you graze some of their crop residues. That can be some pretty high quality grazing for a time. It is possible. But it's not possible if we just got fescue pasture, for example, and that's all we've got, and we're not trying to extend that or use it better. But it is possible in our area here in the southern Missouri that this region to do that. Doesn't work for everybody, but it definitely can be a possibility. So what forages should I plant? I've got that question from many people for many years. What do I plant? Well, first 3 years, if you're not already rotating, but I got a feeling by the way a lot of you guys answered, you folks answered that one question, a lot of you might be rotating good, but planting fence posts and putting in good water and managing the grazing and seeing what happens naturally, because it's really interesting how other plants will come back as we get these rest periods in that will help us in these time areas we don't have the forage, the gaps where those gaps are. And then if you see where you need some forages, maybe consider planting something that's going to help you fill some of those gaps. I realize I didn't give you the magic potion for today, cutting your feed costs, or your hay costs, other than I would throw out, try to minimize waste however you can. That's going to be a huge savings right there. But looking at the whole picture, these are some ideas that can help you in the future to try to minimize having to buy feed and feed it to them. Just remember, anytime we're between that animal and the grass, it's going to be more expensive.
Well, it's very important, very interesting your talk. Thank you so much, Mark. I think the people enjoy it, and probably will be some other questions they can come to you directly, and of course to us, and we can follow up those questions. And Gabriel, Paul, we said last week that we will be making raffle of 2 books.
Oh, you did say two. I'm so sorry. I forgot about the second one.
I want to take away the books. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I did that one more time. It looks like we have number 22. So let me do that really quick. And if they already left, big deal. We'll cover it again next week. And that's gonna be Miss Dana Smith.
Okay.
So, and I do believe I saw her here today. Yeah. So, yep, that's you, Miss Smith. So I will, if you'd like to send me your email really quick, or you can just, I'll get your email from Dr. Salinas and I'll send you an email tomorrow morning. So, and, but other than that.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, just to remember next Monday, we're going to have one talk from Dr. Wetzel, James Wetzel. He will be talking about aquaculture. And this is important because it's like an alternative to be increasing your profit to producing some fish, some other things in aquaculture. So we are going to send the information. And Mr. Green, so thank you so much for all your information. And I think it's very integrated, very complete, and we appreciate very much.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark.
Oh,
All right.
thank you, Mark.
You all have a Merry Christmas.
You
You
too.
too.
Thank you.
Yeah, everyone. Okay, see you. Bye.